I couldn't believe what I saw when I walked down to my own lake one morning. Guide. Right there, hammered into the ground near the dock, was a bold wooden sign that read, Asterisk, asterisk, HOA, rules apply. Asterisk, asterisk, the problem. I don't live in an HOA. Never have. This lake has been in my family for generations, far outside the HOA's boundary lines. And yet, someone had the nerve to mark it like they owned it. I knew exactly who was behind it, members of the nearby HOA board, who'd been trying to flex control beyond their limits for months. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was just a dumb mistake or a bad joke. But then, it got serious fast. Later that afternoon, I got a visit from local police. The HOA had actually called 911, claiming I was vandalizing HOA property by removing the sign. They were trying to trap me into a legal mess over land they had no claim to. That's when I knew this wasn't just about a sign. It was about control. What they didn't know was that I had a document they'd never seen. One signature mind was all it would take to remind them who actually owned the land and water they were messing with. But I didn't play that card right away. I wanted to see just how far they'd go trying to take what was never theirs. And trust me, they went way too far before the truth hit them like a freight train. A few days before the sign appeared, I'd started hearing whispers from neighbors. The HOA had been having private meetings, talking about expanding community influence and bringing order to shared spaces. The thing is, my lake isn't a shared space. It's on my private property, clearly marked, surveyed, and recorded in the county records. But ever since a few newer homes were built closer to the water, fairies started acting like they had some kind of say over the land just because it was nearby. I live on the far edge of the neighborhood, technically outside the HOA boundary. When the community was first developed, my property was intentionally left out because of the lake. The original developer even signed an agreement with my family years ago, stating that the HOA would never have authority over this part of the sea. Land, that agreement. It was filed, sealed, and legally binding. But clearly, the new board never bothered to check. I think what really set them off was when I built a small dock and put up a private property no trespassing sign last month. Ever since then, they've been looking for a way to push back. They sent me letters full of vague threats, citations for unauthorized structures, and even accused me of disturbing the peace by allowing family and friends to fish. It was clear they didn't just want control, they wanted to make an example out of me. But what they didn't realize was, I had everything I needed to stop them cold. After the police visit, things got tense fast. I explained everything calmly to the officers, showed them my property lines, the deed, and even the original agreement excluding my land from the HOA. They nodded, said it looked clear, but reminded me that since a complaint had been made, they had to file a report. It wasn't a big deal legally, but the message was loud and clear. The HOA wasn't backing off. Behind the scenes, things were heating up. I found out from a friend who used to be on the HOA board that the current president, a guy named Mark, had big plans. He wanted to beautify the area around the lake, turn it into a community access point with benches, walking trails, and even a fishing dock. He'd pitched the idea to the board, claiming the lake was technically accessible because it wasn't fenced off. But accessibility doesn't equal ownership. He was hoping no one would challenge it, especially me. At the same time, neighbors started getting dragged in. One family was told they'd be fined if they launched a kayak from my side of the lake. Another was warned not to fish on HOA water or risk losing their community privileges. That's when it hit me. They weren't just messing with me. They were using intimidation to control everyone nearby, hoping nobody would push back. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I stayed quiet for now, letting them dig their own hole. Because when the time was right, I had one document ready. To shut the whole thing down, Mark and the HOA didn't stop with signs or warnings. A week later, I caught a group of contractors on my property measuring the edge of the lake. They claimed they were surveying for community improvements. When I asked who gave them permission, they said the HOA board approved it. I told them plainly they were trespassing. They left without argument, but the message was clear. Mark wasn't bluffing anymore. He was taking steps to claim the lake. As part of the HOA's territory, hoping I'd either give up or mess up legally. That same day, I received a certified letter official looking, full of legal jargon, trying to demand that I comply with HOA water usage policies. They gave me 10 days to respond or face escalating action. The problem was, their policies had no legal hold over my land. But to anyone who didn't know better, the letter looked legit. I could only imagine how many neighbors had backed down over the years because of documents like this. More than just a land issue. This was turning into a community battle. I started getting quiet support from residents who were tired of the board's tactics. One neighbor even slipped me a copy of the last meeting notes, showing how the board voted to redefine boundaries without notifying affected property owners. They thought no one would catch it. I waited, didn't yell, didn't argue, but I kept that original agreement close, because once they made one final move, just one more overstep would be checkmate. Just when I thought the HOA had overplayed their hand, things took an unexpected turn. A neighbor, someone I'd known for years, knocked on my door looking nervous. He handed me a printed email thread between Mark and a local real estate developer. I skimmed through it, and my stomach dropped. Turns out, the HOA wasn't just trying to enforce rules. They were planning to sell access rights to the lake as part of a future development deal. Mark had already pitched the idea of turning the lake into a community feature to boost nearby property values. And the kicker: he claimed the HOA had secured full control over the lake area. That's when it all clicked. This wasn't about rules, signs, or even some power trip. It was about money, a lot of it. If Mark could get away with quietly absorbing my land into the HOA's domain, they could legally list it as part of their community assets and potentially attract major development deals. It was a land grab dressed up as neighborhood policy. The email thread also mentioned a planned community vote, but it wasn't going to include me or other non-HOA residents. They were going to stage the whole thing as if the lake already belonged to them. And if that went through, it could complicate my claim even with the old agreement in hand. I realized I wasn't just protecting my property anymore. I was about to stop a scheme that could rewrite the boundaries of the entire neighborhood. The clock was ticking. The night before the HOA's vote, I made copies of every document I had the deed. The original agreement excluding my property from the HOA, and the leaked emails. I showed up to their members-only meeting, uninvited, and walked straight to the front of the room. Mark looked stunned. A few board members tried to stop me, but the crowd went quiet. I held up the signed agreement and said, "You're all about to vote on something you don't even own." Then I passed around copies of the emails and the developer proposal. Gasps spread across the room as people read Mark's words in black and white, his plan to profit from something that was never his to give away. Some board members looked furious. Others looked betrayed. Mark tried to defend himself, but it was too late. The truth had hit the room like a lightning bolt. The HOA attorney, who had been quietly observing, stood up and asked to see my documents. After flipping through them, he confirmed everything. This property is not, and never has been, under HOA control, he said flatly. And any further attempts to claim otherwise could result in serious legal consequences. The room erupted. The vote was canceled. Mark stepped down the next day, but here's the twist: 2 weeks later, I got an offer from that same developer, this time addressed directly to me. Only this time, they weren't trying to take the lake. They were asking to lease it. And suddenly, I held all the cards. I didn't accept the developer's offer right away. Honestly, I needed time to think. After everything that had happened with the HOA, the fake signs, the 911 call, and the backdoor deals, wanted to make sure I wasn't just reacting out of frustration. So I met with a local land use attorney and had the whole situation reviewed, top to bottom. Turns out, not only was my lake fully protected under the original agreement, but Mark's actions had also opened the HOA up to liability. They quietly issued a formal apology and agreed to never claim authority over my property again. As for the neighborhood, things changed. A few board members resigned, and the new leadership started doing things the right way, transparently, and with respect for actual property lines. Several neighbors reached out to thank me for standing up, saying they'd felt powerless against the HOA for years. The developer? I ended up working out a deal with them not to build, but to sponsor conservation efforts around the lake. Now it stays private, peaceful, and protected, just like my family always intended.